The boy failed his college entrance exam and was rejected by the university. But instead of feeling heartbroken or upset, he rode his bike around town without a care in the world. He greeted neighbors he'd usually ignore, suddenly full of energy and warmth. But the neighbors, unfazed, just assumed this failed student was beyond saving. Even his own father, who should have been his biggest supporter, pretended not to know him, ashamed of Dave's idle lifestyle.
Friend of yours?
Still, even with the whole town looking down on him, Dave stayed carefree and cheerful, because on a slab of stone in that abandoned quarry lay 3 other friends who had also failed the exam alongside him. To them, at 19, as long as their friendship stayed strong, there was no need to fear the uncertainty of the future. But their peace was unexpectedly disrupted by the arrival of a few out-of-town college students.
Hey, who's that? Hey, Cutter!
These students called the locals Cutters, a sneering nickname, and the 4 friends had no words to respond. They had once planned to follow in their father's footsteps and become stonecutters too. But the once thriving quarry town had fallen into decline, and it could no longer support their dreams. Even their escape from reality, their secret hideout, was ridiculed by these outsiders. The college kids had access to fancy swimming pools, yet still came to intrude on their humble watering hole. Frustrated, the 4 friends decided to fight back, driving to the campus for some petty revenge. But the moment they laid eyes on the campus, with its grand library and sprawling tennis courts, they realized just how bleak their own lives were. By the courts, confident girls strolled by in the sunlight. On the lawn, elegant students lounged around, chatting casually in designer clothes. Another kind of life was right in front of them, shining, privileged, yet so far out of reach. All the boys could do was sit in their car and sigh in defeat. The sudden sense of inferiority made them want to retreat. They were ready to give up and go home. But just then, a few college students playing nearby accidentally threw their frisbee into the road, and it was crushed under their car. It was a harmless accident, but crushing the frisbee gave Mike an odd sense of satisfaction. Seeing the furious reaction from the students, Mike couldn't resist. He threw the car in reverse and ran over the frisbee again. And just like that, a grudge between the Cutters and the college kids officially began. But that lucky win brought only a fleeting thrill. It couldn't shake off the deep, lingering confusion and frustration they carried. After all, they were still just a group of aimless Cutters. Watching the confident college athletes charging across the field, Mike couldn't help but remember that he used to be the best quarterback in his high school. To stay in shape, he never smoked or drank. But the moment graduation hit, his football career came to an abrupt end. Now, every year, the papers celebrate new college football stars, but his name would never be among them.
I'm just gonna be Mike. Oh, mean old man Mike.
Just like so many other young people who feel stuck, they longed for a brighter life, one they couldn't seem to reach. Even being called a lowly Cutter was almost too high a dream. But unlike Mike, Dave at least had a dream he could chase. He wanted to become a professional cyclist and ride in the Giro d'Italia. To follow in the footsteps of his Italian racing idols, Dave ate pasta, listened to Italian songs, studied the language, and even waxed his legs regularly. His father hated it, but couldn't do anything to stop him. While Dave was obsessed with his dream, the shortest of the group, Moocher, had a more modest goal: to marry his girlfriend, who was half a head taller than him. To make that happen, he kept looking for a stable job. Compared to Moocher's determination in love, the tallest friend, Cyril, was full of hesitation. He wanted to play basketball but lacked stamina. He dreamed of going to college but couldn't get a scholarship. He even tried singing but didn't have the voice. Simply put, nothing ever worked out for him. Among them all, Dave still seemed the most promising. He kept winning trophy after trophy with ease, though each victory came at the cost of yet another worn-out tire. You could often see him fixing his bike in front of his house. That's how he happened to hear the exciting news. His idol team from Italy was coming to Indiana for a race. They were said to ride like the wind, noble in spirit, singing like nightingales, and soaring like eagles. This sudden news sent waves of excitement through Dave's heart. Everything he saw around him seemed to glow with joy, the whole world pulsing with energy. Pumped with adrenaline, he jumped on his bike and headed to the road, challenging an 18-wheeler truck to a race. But no matter how hard the gears screamed, it was no match for a roaring engine. Quickly, Dave began falling behind, but he didn't give up. Instead, he pushed even harder. The truck driver glanced at the speedometer. It read 40 miles per hour, then held up 4 fingers, signaling the kid to stop dreaming. But to Dave, that hand was a taunt. Fueled by pure defiance, he pedaled even faster. His bike became a symbol of blazing youth charging forward. The driver, glancing back at the stubborn boy in the mirror, flashed 5 fingers in admiration, then hit the gas and sped off. But to his surprise, even at 60 miles per hour, he still couldn't shake off the boy furiously chasing the wind behind him. And their high-speed chase ended up catching the attention of a police car, and so a wild 3-way chase broke out across the golden-green countryside. As the sirens wailed closer, the truck driver gave in first, switching on his hazard lights in surrender. Dave seized the moment, pushing forward and crossing into Ohio. Since the local police couldn't pursue him across state lines, he not only won the race, he got away clean. But Dave still didn't feel satisfied, so he shared the exciting news about his favorite cycling team coming to town with his best friends, hoping they could celebrate together. It turned out Moocher had found a job washing cars on College Avenue because he was planning to get married and felt it was time to stop fooling around. As the sun set, Mike reluctantly dropped Moocher off at his new workplace. He always thought the 4 of them would stick together forever. He never imagined they'd part ways so soon. Though they threw insults around like always, each of the 3 friends gave Moocher their most heartfelt blessings before he left. But Moocher's first day on the job turned into a disaster when his boss unknowingly touched a nerve.
Punch the clock, shorty.
Moocher's height had always been a sensitive subject, his one untouchable nerve. Just like that, after 1 second on the job, Moocher returned to the laid-back gang of 4. The boss rushed out when he heard the commotion, but before he could figure out what had happened, Moocher had already disappeared down the road. In their 19-year-old lives, money and dignity felt like 2 parallel lines that would never meet, forcing them to make a one-way choice in how they lived. And without hesitation, they chose dignity. In the days that followed, the boys kept wandering around with no jobs, no direction, just the freedom to do whatever they pleased. Even getting fast food required pooling their coins, but at least no one could boss them around. Their youth was a wild mix of arrogance and confusion, growing recklessly under the weight of inexperience. Alongside that came their curiosity about the opposite sex. One day, while Dave was on campus learning Italian, he happened to catch a glimpse of a girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. It was just a 3-second glance, but it stirred up a storm in his heart like nothing before. When he saw the girl drop a book as she drove away on her scooter, Dave, skilled in cycling, seized the moment. He picked up the book and raced after her. His eyes burned with determination as if he had made up his mind about something, and his feet never stopped pedaling, like he was chasing the first light of dawn in his heart. After pedaling through several intersections and weaving around blocks, Dave finally caught up and returned the lost book to the girl, whose name was Catherine. Hearing Dave's accent and seeing his outfit, Catherine assumed he was an Italian exchange student. Dave didn't correct her. He proudly confirmed it and even gave himself a charming Italian name. With love in the air, even the hills felt smoother, the sun warmer. He spread his arms to the sky, smiling as the green leaves shimmered with life above him. On the winding forest path, the scenery rolled on endlessly, filled with peace, beauty, and a heart full of joy. Back at home, Dave's appetite soared. He devoured his father's entire dinner.
The hell are you doing? Them's my French fries.
His mother, who had been outside trimming the lawn, rushed in and asked what the father and son were arguing about this time. To win the heart of his dream girl, he practiced Italian love songs every day with Cyril's help. Even though neither of them had a shred of musical talent, they still mustered up the courage to drive to the college campus at dusk. They quietly snuck over to the girls' dorm, where Dave began singing an Italian love ballad. He was off-key the entire time, but his voice was full of emotion, so much so that Catherine listened, completely entranced. The other girls applauded too, touched by his boldness. In the end, Dave won Catherine's heart. They spent a romantic night together, under the glow of the moonlight. But Cyril wasn't nearly as lucky. One of the girls had told Catherine's obsessive admirer what was going on. And that admirer just so happened to be Rod, the same guy they had previously clashed with. Fueled by old grudges and new jealousy, Rod showed up with a car full of friends and caught Cyril before he could escape. They beat him up badly. When Mike found out that Cyril had been beaten up, he couldn't just let it slide. As the big brother of the group, he immediately decided to strike back and stand up for him. That night, they marched into the busiest restaurant in College Town. Coincidentally, Dave was there too, on a date with Catherine. As the two groups met in the dining hall, Mike immediately took a fighting stance. But just then, Cyril lost his nerve. He couldn't bring himself to point out the guys who had attacked him. Even Moocher wanted to leave before things got worse. And so, a brawl between local townies and college boys broke out. Even though they made the first move, they didn't have the numbers on their side, and the three of them soon fell behind in the fight. During the fight, plates crashed to the floor, and the sound of shattering echoed like the roar of youth. Just as Dave was about to join the fray, the town's police officer, who also happened to be Mike's older brother, arrived just in time to break it up. Everyone was hauled off to the dean's office for a serious talk. Being a local himself, the dean didn't want to create more trouble in his hometown, so he suggested the two groups settle their differences in another way. It just so happened that the annual Little 500 bike race was expanding, and local teams would be invited to compete. But Rod, the student athlete, scoffed at the idea. He said the Cutters weren't worthy of sharing a track with real college athletes, and it wasn't just Rod who had objections. Division also began to form among the four friends. Dave didn't want to enter the race. He was caught up in his romance with Catherine, and he knew racing would reveal his true identity as a Cutter. Cyril thought they'd never beat the college athletes, and Moocher thought it was time for the four of them to part ways and focus on their own lives. Only Mike still had that fire inside. He refused to back down, but the race required a four-man team to register. For the first time, their unbreakable brotherhood started to fall apart.
You're not the quarterback here, Mike.
Well, at least I was once. Which is a hell of a lot better than being a midget all my life.
Cut it out! Just cut it out!
You know, I think you're just afraid of those college guys.
Oh, and you're not, right, Mike?
The only thing I'm afraid of is wasting the rest of my life with you guys.
After all, no youth lasts forever, and maybe disagreement is just a part of growing up. Because learning to put yourself first is the beginning of becoming an adult. Just as they were locked in argument, Rod showed up with a few of his buddies, stepping right onto their turf. When Dave spotted Catherine among them, he quickly ducked into a bush to hide. Mike, on the other hand, boldly climbed onto a slab of stone, raised his arm in a defiant gesture, and then dove straight into the water. Rod wasn't about to back down. He jumped in too, and the two began racing across the pond toward the opposite bank. Each group cheered wildly for their champion, but Mike's self-taught swimming skills, sharpened in a muddy pit, were no match for a trained college athlete. After just one lap, Rod had already pulled ahead by 2 full lengths. Seeing how easily he could win, Rod began taunting Mike with backstrokes, teasingly slowing down to give Mike hope, only to flip and surge ahead just as Mike was catching up. In the end, Rod reached the finish first and mocked Mike's foolish attempt to challenge him, but Mike wasn't about to give up. Even after slamming his head and drawing blood, he kept swimming, desperate to prove the race wasn't over. His all-out determination left Rod stunned and shocked everyone else watching from the sidelines. Seeing Mike exhausted and starting to choke, his 3 best friends immediately jumped into the water to rescue him. In the rippling pool, what echoed was the silent roar of Mike's defiant and unyielding youth. Afterward, Dave felt discouraged, believing their act of rescuing Mike had fully exposed him as a Cutter. But Moocher told him not to worry too much. After all, someone who truly loves you wouldn't care about your background. He said this with absolute confidence, because his own girlfriend was the perfect example. Not only did she accept Moocher, despite his lack of ambition, she even went with him that weekend to register for marriage. They were so broke, they had to split the $5 registration fee, but the sweetness of love made it all worth it. And that moment happened to be witnessed by Dave, who was passing by. Seeing a love that led to marriage filled him with envy. Back home, he was considering whether to tell Catherine the truth, but his thoughts were interrupted by his father's usual grumbling.
Worthless, Evelyn. I tell you, I die of shame every time I see him. Goddamn lazy freeloader.
Ray hadn't always been so harsh with Dave. After Dave failed his college entrance exams, Ray gave him a year to find direction. But over the past year, all Dave had done was win cycling trophies or wander aimlessly around town. He never really grew out of the confusion of youth, and he still hadn't shaken off the label of being directionless and unmotivated. Dave's mom suggested he join his father in selling used cars. At least it was an honest job. Ray grumbled but agreed, assigning Dave to vehicle washing and detailing. By the end of a long day of hard labor, Dave was completely worn out. Under his father's disappointed gaze, Dave changed into his cycling gear and began his nighttime training ride. After all, the Italian team's race was coming up next week. From that day on, Dave washed cars diligently on sunny days and trained in place under rooftops on rainy ones. His sweat became fuel for his soul, his hands became wings of ambition, and his dream gave him unstoppable energy. After a week, Dave asked his father for Saturday off, to race with his idols, but Ray flatly refused. At that moment, some college students came in, demanding to return their car. Ray had once promised a full refund within 90 days if the buyer wasn't satisfied, but now he was backing out, using the lack of a written contract as an excuse to refuse the return. As the argument escalated, Dave stepped in to reason with his dad.
Refund? Refund?
All I want is a refund.
Refund? Are you crazy? Refund?
Easy, Ray.
Refund?
But Ray, overwhelmed with stress, suddenly collapsed from a heart attack. While Ray lay unconscious, Dave processed the refund for the students, but the guilt that followed hit him hard. So Dave decided to drop out of the race and stay by his father's side until he recovered. But his mother brought out an old, dusty passport. She told Dave that in her youth, she dreamed of collecting every star the world had to offer. She had practiced countless ways to speak at customs booths, but in the end, she was held back by the grind of daily life in this small town, which is why dreams aren't something you wait on when you're young. When the chance comes, you have to grab it. Winning that trophy, like always, would make the whole family proud. Inspired by her words, Dave no longer hesitated. He showed up at the starting line, ready for the challenge. Cheers roared through the stadium as the Italian team made their grand entrance, soaking in the crowd's excitement. Dave's Cutter brothers were there too, cheering him on with everything they had. The race began with a sharp blast of the referee's whistle, and the Indiana 100-mile cycling competition was officially underway. All the riders surged forward with everything they had. The Italian cycling team's strength truly lived up to its reputation. Within a few turns, they were far ahead, nearly untouchable. Still, Dave in the second pack was no slouch. As the race went on, he began to pick up speed. His chain growled like a beast as he surged forward, overtaking rider after rider. Soon, his idol's back was just ahead. Dave pushed harder, caught up, and greeted them in fluent Italian with excitement. But to his shock, his so-called heroes held back his gear shifter and taunted him with smug smiles. Naively, Dave thought it was just playful banter between a fan and his heroes, so he caught up again, eager to talk. But this time, they pulled out a metal rod and knocked Dave right off the track. In that moment, the illusion shattered. The men he had worshipped turned out to be nothing more than dirty players using underhanded tricks. Dave would rather be defeated by strength, like Mike, than be crushed by betrayal. As the sun set and the race ended, a shadow fell over Dave's spirit. That night, bruised and broken, he stumbled home. And the first thing he said was to ask about his father's health. Ray, still bitter about the unauthorized refund, had 1,000 harsh words ready. Yet before he could speak, Dave's tears got there first. He said he finally understood why his father broke promises, because this world is full of people lying to each other, and he blamed himself for being too naive, too foolish, to see it sooner. Dave's honest outburst left Ray completely stunned. He never imagined his carefree son could feel such deep pain. After tasting the bitterness of betrayal, Dave decided to come clean with Catherine. He told her he wasn't some rich kid from Naples, and his name wasn't Enrico. He was just a regular cutter from Bloomington, no different from the rest of the town. Dave thought honesty would be the key to true love, that with a sincere heart, he could win Catherine back. But instead, Catherine walked away in heartbreak, then returned, furious, and slapped him hard. And just like that, Dave ended the romance built on lies. At the same time, he gave up on his dream of cycling. He decided to quietly accept his fate as a small-town boy. Seeing his son so downcast, Ray suggested they go out for a talk. They walked together beneath towering buildings, the evening breeze carrying away their weariness and stirring forgotten memories. Ray spoke about his glory days as a cutter, young, strong, working alongside the fathers of Mike, Moocher, and Cyril. Together, they helped build these grand structures. But now, as laborers, they couldn't even afford to live in the buildings they helped raise. And that abandoned quarry ultimately became nothing more than a symbol of regret. At that moment, Ray asked his son about his plans for the future. Dave said he had taken the college entrance exam and done pretty well, but deep down he still didn't want to go to college. Instead, he wanted to stay with his 3 friends and be cutters forever.
Don't want to go to college, Dad. To hell with them. I'm proud of being a cutter.
You're not a cutter. I'm a cutter.
Maybe what Dave feared most was the kind of growing up that comes with confusion at a young age. He longed for change, but wasn't ready to let go of what he already had. So he hesitated between going to college and staying a cutter. But the pride of being a cutter belonged to the glory of the previous generation. Ray didn't want his son using an old map to find a new path. And he didn't want him to imprison his time using someone else's life. Ray said everyone feels lost during their youth, but dreams are always the compass pointing toward the future. So, with his father's encouragement, Dave picked up his passion for cycling once again and decided to register for the college bike race. But Mike, who had already been crushed once, had lost his confidence completely. Seeing Mike so downcast, Dave decided he would ride all 200 laps by himself to prove that those arrogant college boys weren't better than them. He repaired the bike that his idols had damaged in a dimly lit garage, and in doing so, also pieced together his broken dreams. He then returned to the track, riding lap after lap to sharpen his strength. He was determined to give his imperfect youth a perfect ending. The night before the race, Moocher was invited to Dave's home for dinner. Evelyn brought out team jerseys she'd made herself, white t-shirts proudly printed with the word Cutters. But this time, Dave didn't shy away from the label. He wore it with pride. Because being a cutter wasn't something to be ashamed of, it represented the shining legacy of their hometown. As the school anthem was sung with heartfelt emotion, the principal reiterated the race rules. Riders could tag in freely, and the first team to complete 200 laps would be the winner. This was a contest of true strength. Now the chance to restore the glory of the cutters was right in front of them, and Dave's mission was anything but easy. As the crowd erupted into excited cheers, the little 500 bike race officially began. Rod's athletic team took the lead. As outsiders, the cutters were placed at the very back, but that slight disadvantage didn't affect Dave's performance. With absolute skill, he passed several teams in the very first corner. His brothers cheered him on from the sidelines. Ray, tending to his business but thinking of his son, listened to the race on the car radio. By lap 30, most of the other teams began rotating riders as planned. Dave used that window to surge ahead and take the lead, holding firmly onto first place for the next dozen laps. The scene had Dave's teammates on the sidelines cheering with excitement, and inside the car, Ray couldn't help but smile with pride. Unable to contain his excitement, Ray ditched the business and sped toward the campus. Meanwhile, the wheels of youth spun into their 100th lap. Dave was far ahead, having lapped several teams. All eyes in the arena were now on this young man from a small town. But just as he was about to lap another rider, he collided with someone and was thrown violently off the track. Ray, still on the road, heard the bad news over the radio. His brows furrowed instantly, and his hands on the steering wheel began to tremble. Back on the track, Dave returned, but the pain on his face was obvious. Even with his strong will, he could barely keep going. Eventually, the burning pain in his legs became unbearable, and he collapsed. This led to disagreement within the Cutters team. Mike, who had already tasted defeat once, refused to take over. In a moment of desperation, Moocher jumped on the bike amid the mocking laughter of the varsity team. Everyone knew it was a bad substitution. Despite giving it everything he had, Moocher's physical disadvantage meant he couldn't stop the college team from taking the lead. Meanwhile, Dave was being treated on a stretcher. Ray also arrived at the scene to cheer for the Cutters. But things on the track didn't look good. Moocher gave it everything he had to hold third place before handing it off to Cyril. But tall and skinny Cyril could only pedal with his long legs at a slow and uneven rhythm. The lead they once had vanished completely. He was soon swallowed up by the pack. Mike sighed, saying it was all over. Rod, back in the lead, began celebrating early.
Nice try, kid.
That sudden taunt from his longtime rival reignited Mike's fire. He motioned for the exhausted Cyril to stop. He would clean up this mess himself. Even the police officer who was supposed to be keeping order at the scene turned into a cheering fan, rooting loudly for his younger brother Mike. Mike was determined to become the quarterback of Bloomington High one more time. With explosive strength and a never-say-die attitude, Mike pulled the Cutters from last place all the way up to fourth and pushed toward third. But biking wasn't his strength. Out of breath and out of energy, Mike hit his limit. After his wounds were treated, Dave glanced at the exhausted Mike, and his eyes happened to meet the hopeful gaze of his parents. That moment, he decided to risk everything for his youth. By now, Mike had completely collapsed on the ground. Dave asked Cyril to tie him tightly to the bike with bandages. For the honor of his town, for the dreams of youth, and for the expectations on his shoulders, he was ready to give his all in the final 15 laps. Under the tree, his mother raised her fist and cheered. This was the son they had always believed in. Back on the track, Dave was unstoppable. In no time, he clawed his way back to the front. Even as blood streamed from his legs, his pedaling only grew faster. Giving everything for victory, that was the true spirit of competition and the best version of youth. As the race entered its final lap, Dave pushed forward into second place. Now it all came down to one final showdown, him versus the varsity team, small-town youth against elite college athletes, a battle of fate. Youth and growth are journeys everyone must take. We celebrate the sudden bloom of those young years, yet we must also bear the sorrow that follows. We all end up confused. What is youth? What is growing up? And what should the ending be? This movie has already given us the answer. Youth is 3 dazzling chases in a lifetime. It shines like an Italian opera, but it also deflates like a blown tire, stalls with the wail of a police siren, and collapses when our idols fall. Growth is just like the little 500 bike race. It includes hesitation, falls, and doubt, but also the courage to fight back, to stop running, and to rise above it all. In the end, with Dave pouring out every last ounce of strength, the underestimated Cutters clinched the championship through sheer perseverance. And each of them received the reward they truly deserved. Short Moocher felt what it was like to be admired for the first time. Cyril enjoyed the rare warmth of being celebrated by the crowd. Mike reclaimed his lost pride and reconciled with his brother. And Ray, the father who had never believed in his son, finally smiled at Dave. Dave's youth burned bright because it was fueled by a dream. And that dream shined even brighter because of the passion he poured into it. And his small town found new light because of his courage. From now on, the arrogant college kids would never again call them Cutters with disdain, because now that name meant something more. It had become a title of victory, a symbol of pride. And the true end of youth and growth is saying goodbye to fear, to confusion, and to the person you once were. In the final scene, Ray's used car shop proudly displayed the Cutters label. Dave no longer feared growing up. He chose to go to college and even signed up for French classes because his new dream was to ride in the Tour de France, and his mother's growing belly signaled that he was about to become a big brother. Back then, his parents thought Dave was too unreliable and planned to raise another child from scratch. But now, they no longer believed he was a failure because he had overcome the confusion of youth, discovered his dream, and became a role model for the entire town. This is a story that stirs your blood and brings tears to your eyes. It once won the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay, and even 45 years later, it still resonates deeply. Because the path of growing up never changes. Everyone is always on their way to finding who they are. Everyone wanders through youth, unsure of where they're going. And everyone imagines a beautiful future, a world of flowers, fluttering butterflies, and skies lit with the smiles of those we love. But life is often full of lies, setbacks, and helplessness. When our bright dreams collide with a harsh reality, those colorful fantasies may get shelved as regrets, leaving behind nothing but an empty dream. Some of us stop right there, refusing to face the world outside, retreating into our comfort zones. Just like Dave once refused to go to college, and Mike was too afraid to look for work. They wandered without purpose, afraid to take that first step toward change, unsure of how to face the future. But one day, we must all raise the sails of time and carry our bags toward the far shore of youth. Because whether we're ready or not, that's what growing up means. And growing up means saying goodbye to confusion, to innocence, to naivety, to tears, to regrets, and to the person we were yesterday. Even if there's no spring after the storm, no stars when night falls, no trophy after the struggle, we must hide our weakness, stand tall again with pride. Let go of resentment and complaints, and move forward with calm and courage, stepping bravely into the next chapter of youth.